Meet Shaun Tomson. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's a world surfing champion and recognized as one of the 10 greatest surfers of all time. And he created a code that is simplicity in itself, and it's going to help propel you to much success.
This was the path that I wanted to take through my life, and I had to figure out how could I make the economics work out, how could I create a sustainable business. And the code is just a simple way to commit to a life of purpose. I'll have faith, I will pray, I will live a life of moral integrity. Once you write it down, and once you've made those promises to yourself, you've committed to them.
Welcome. Thanks for joining in with us. Do you know your purpose? Do you really know why? Deep down inside, why you are doing the business you're doing? Now, if it's just to make money, it's possible you may be having a hard time of it. If so, do you know why? Let me ask you this. Would you get up early every single day and go to work and work until dark and then return home with absolutely no income to show for it, and then get up the next day and start all over again and do that day after day? Yeah, that's right. It is the life of an entrepreneur, isn't it? Now, if you have the code at some point, the income starts rolling in like mad, right? And as long as you're standing on your purpose as the foundation to keep everything going, it's going to work well. Well, guess what? We're going to chat about that and a whole lot more. We're going to discuss finding your purpose with Shaun Thompson. And while we're at it, this is all about helping you and your friends turn your vision into reality. We want to help you get very successful at growing your business to a high sustainable level. And we're going to help turn you into an elite entrepreneur. Meet Shaun Thompson. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's a world surfing champion and recognized as one of the 10 greatest surfers of all time. And he created a code that is simplicity in itself, and it's going to help propel you to much success. You're almost not going to believe how easy it is, but you will believe. I think that says enough. Let's get into it. Hi, Shaun. Welcome to the DUrso show.
Hi, Tony. It's really great to be on, and I'm hoping that my perspective and method can help entrepreneurs out there, perhaps people that are thinking about being entrepreneurs too. I was an entrepreneur my whole life. I started my first company when I was 22 years old, and my whole life has been devoted to entrepreneurship. So you're speaking to a guy that's been in the trenches, that's been in hand-to-hand combat, that's failed and been successful too, and learned some lessons along the way that perhaps might help the listeners.
Well, that's great. We're all looking forward to getting help on finding our purpose. And you and I have both mentioned a little bit of it, but I like to spend a few minutes and really understand, how did it all start for you, Shaun? What's your backstory?
So my backstory is that I fell in love with surfing at a very young age. My father was a champion swimmer in his youth and was hoping to one day win a gold medal at the Olympic Games, and unfortunately was terribly attacked by a shark. It nearly killed him, destroyed his right arm, so destroyed his swimming career, but he never lost this wonderful love and passion that he had for the ocean, and he imparted it on to me. And I fell in love with the ocean at a young age. Caught my first wave when I was 9 years old. Eventually I became a world surfing champion. I won 19 major pro events around the world. I was the youngest guy to win and the oldest guy to win. All my records have been broken by a fabulous surfer called Kelly Slater, who's recognized as the greatest surfer of all time. But along the way, I realized that it was very difficult to make a living just from going surfing. So a group of individuals from South Africa, Australia, Hawaii, we formed and created professional surfing. We actually built a professional sport out of what was then a lifestyle. And I created my first company at 22 years old. I called it Instinct. And for any entrepreneurs out there who are thinking of starting a new company and creating a brand, it's wonderful to really dig deep and find a brand that has resonance to you beyond just a collection of words. So the best moments in surfing are riding inside the tube of the wave And the very best tube rides happen when you're operating on instinct. So I thought instinct was a very apt name for my brand. Eventually, we were sold in 13 countries. We had hundreds of employees. I sponsored two other surfers who I was competing with at the same time to world championships. So it was wonderful to be a mentor. So when I retired from the tour, I sold my brand, Instinct. Then I moved to the United States with my wife and 5-year-old son. And I worked for Patagonia, for a wonderful company, Yvon Chouinard, and the team hired me. I ran the apparel division, which was one of their biggest contributors. Learned a lot about business and purpose from working for that wonderful company. And then my wife and I started a new brand called Solitude. So while Instinct was about riding inside the tube and operating on instinct, Solitude was about escape, just paddling out towards that open horizon and leaving the worries of the world behind you. We created a beautiful apparel brand, and we sold into great stores right across the nation, Saks and Barney's and Nordstroms and Bloomingdale's and surf shops and outdoor stores. We had a very eclectic brand. My wife was a great designer. And then we got a phone call one day after having been in business for about 7 years. Do you want to sell your company? From a publicly traded company. So we sold our company, and then we stayed on for a few years as part of the earnout. And then during that period of time, I wrote my first book called Surface Code, which was 12 simple lessons for riding through life. It was about the lessons that surfing can teach you about life, not how to be the best surfer in the world, but the lessons that it can teach you about character and about leadership and about empathy and connectivity and commitment and optimism. And as the book was being released, my wife and I lost our beautiful son, Matthew, who was 15 and a half at the time. He just played a dangerous game that he heard about at school. It was called the choking game. At his school, all kids wore school ties. There was a private school. They wore uniforms, and he'd heard about it at school and played it. And it was dreadful. It goes around at schools. We found out it's just a dreadful game. So I really, I think, changed the trajectory of my life. And I really looked deeper into what our fundamental purpose is in life. And I came to realize that what I wanted to do was really activate positive decision making and positive choices amongst people. How can I help them find their true purpose, and how can I help people make better decisions about their life? So I went back to grad school. I went to do a Master of Science in Leadership because I was fascinated by the art and science of influence and inspiration, and spent a few years at grad school. And then I started speaking and writing more books. And now I do speaking engagements and workshops to the world's largest corporations: Cisco, Google, Gap, Disney, Gilead Sciences, all sorts of corporations, a lot of new AI, exploding AI companies. And I reveal a simple method, a code that people can use to find purpose. And it's really remarkably effective. It's transformational. It's simple. And it gives me a lot of satisfaction to give two things to people. I give a perspective, no prescription, just a perspective of my life and the lessons that I've learned about surfing, about commitment and honor and integrity and connectivity. And then I show people how to write the code, and people write the code in 15 minutes, 12 lines. Every line beginning
John,
with five words.
we're gonna go into the code in just a little bit and explain what this is to the audience. But I'd just like to comment on something first. Uh, Sorry to hear about the loss of your son. It's very sad.
Thank you,
Uh,
Johnny.
I've gone through, if that's the right way to say it grammatically, so many deaths in our family and in our friends in the past year. It's just more than ever. So I really understand how deep and how strong that is. So I just want to say, sorry to hear, very, very sorry to hear
Thank
about
you.
that. Yes. And one thing I wanted to ask you about your vision, right? Because here you are, you're a surfer. Well, now I know surfers. I have some friends as surfers, and I go down to the street. I go down the street to the beach. I don't go down the street. However, I said it was wrong grammatically. But I go down the beach, down the street. My tongue is in a tie. I'm gonna have to edit that out. I actually don't know what I'm saying. That's very strange. I always know what I'm saying. Let me find a place to phase that in. Let me put it this way. I know surfers and I see surfers constantly at the beach down the street. And I see them, I see them wipe out, I see some make it, and it's very thrilling to see them, make the way for a while. But to make a business and a life career out of it is a completely different thing. The people that I see, the people that I know, none of them make a career out of it, but you did a very successful career. So I'm curious, Shaun, where did this vision come that, you're going, hey, I can do this. I can make this a successful life career. How did that occur for you to then do it as a business?
Well, I think firstly, you have to have that passion. I had the passion for surfing, and I knew this was the path that I wanted to take through my life, and I had to figure out how could I make the economics work out? How could I create a sustainable business? So I thought, wow, create an apparel company that can be sold around the world, that's reflective of my lifestyle, that's reflective of surfing, and create this attractive brand that people would aspire to, and create a tribe. So I think I had the passion, I had the drive, I had the vision, and then I got off my ass, I got off my bum, and I did it. I didn't cry, I didn't moan, I didn't say, well, I can't find the capital. I made it happen. And as an entrepreneur, you just got to make it happen. And there's going to be tough times and there's going to be great times, but you have to keep pushing forward. So there's a wonderful surfing analogy that I think is reflective of what entrepreneurs have to do. And that is, you have to always paddle back out. So no matter the wipeout, you got to paddle back out. You got to get back on your board and you got to paddle back out. And there's a number of different layers in that simple concept of paddling back out. Yes, one would immediately think of perseverance and resilience, but underlying that is hope. Why are you paddling back out? Because you're hopeful that you're going to get the next one. So you've got resilience, you've got perseverance, you've got hope, you've got optimism. And those are four fundamentals to the success of any entrepreneurial activity, whether you were a one-man band or you've got 5,000 employees, it's the same. When you wipe out, paddle back out, because that's the only way you're going to get another wave.
Shaun, we're going to get a little bit more into it, and actually, we're going to go on the flip side of this, but uh, the audience will understand. I'm going to ask you the question first. What is the overriding purpose behind what you do? Why do you do it, Shaun?
So the suffering that I endured when I lost my beautiful son to a poor choice was certainly an impetus for me to go down a different path. I'd always been going down a path of empowering people, inspiration, but I really went down a path of how can I help people make better choices to live a better life? Because the fundamental social problem in the world today, and I think it's the most important social problem facing all of us, whether you have children or you don't have children, and that is 1 million Americans die every year from poor choices. Out of the 2.4 million Americans that die every year, 1 million of those deaths are poor choices. Traffic accidents, homicide, illicit drugs, suicide, obesity related to bad diet, heart disease related to alcoholism and smoking. So these are conscious decisions, and this statistic of 1 million out of 2.4 doesn't come from me, but it comes from a wonderful study that a guy called Professor Rolf Keeney did at Duke. So if there's a way, and I think I've found a way to help people make a better choice, I do it because it helps me with what happened to my beautiful son and gives me meaning and purpose in my life. I think it's important to really define, like, what is purpose? What's our fundamental mission? So, the academic definition of purpose is a committed long-term intention to achieve aims that are meaningful to oneself and the broader world. So it's committed intention to making the world better and making your life better. And how can you help people create this committed intent? 12 lines. Write it in 15 minutes, every line beginning with, I will. I will what? Now, I listened to an interview that you did with your last guest, a guy called James Ziegler. Sounds like he's one of the greatest salesmen of all time. And you asked him a question of, when did he realize in his life he was going to be successful? He said, I made a commitment. I will, this is what he said on your show, I will create sustainable success. So when you use those two words, those are words of absolute unequivocal commitment. And your previous guest admitted it. He changed his life by making one statement. I say to people, spend 15 minutes, write 12 lines, every line beginning with I will, and then share it. Do this process with your family, do this process with your colleagues at work, do this process with your team at work, do this process with your friends at school or university or postgrad program. But this creates this sentiment of optimism, the sentiment of hope, and the sentiment of absolute commitment. And then when you do it in a group, it creates accountability.
It's absolutely amazing. We're going to get a little bit more into that. We're talking about finding your purpose with Shaun Tomson, and you can find him at ShaunThompson.com. That's ShaunTomson.com, ShaunThompson.com. Shaun, this is absolutely fascinating. It's riveting. And let's just get into your vision path here. Let's go a little bit more. Let's go deeper. We're entrepreneurs. We're business owners. Help us learn. First, let me ask you perhaps a silly, dumb question, but it's very important. Why do we need to find our purpose?
Well, there have been some interesting academic studies that have been done on the benefits of purpose. So, number one, there was a study done at the University of Michigan of 76,000 people. So this is not a study that's done by a university professor at a famous university of 250 freshmen or sophomores. This is a longitudinal study of 76,000 people, long period of time. So here's some of the results. Living with a sense of purpose makes you live twice as long. How about that? How about that being an inducement? Working with a sense of purpose leads to greater productivity, motivation, and retention. How about that? And then what about a study from Ernst & Young of 450 top CEOs? Purpose-led companies perform 42% better than companies that are simply in business. So purpose impacts not just one's motivation, but purpose has a direct impact on top and bottom line revenue. Now, here's another one too. So when I originally did my original university studies many years ago, I came and I was studying theory of management. Well, today it's called leadership. I came across this amazing author who's actually, I think, the greatest management theorist of all time, a guy called Peter Drucker. So Peter Drucker is like the god of management and leadership. And he has been ripped off by every single popular sort of leadership guru. But I think Peter Drucker wrote 32 books. But I think one of his best books is his simplest and thinnest book. And in it, it's called The 5 Questions. So for any of you entrepreneurs out there, I've written a number of books, and sure, you can check out my books. My books are pretty cool. Peter wrote this really cool book. It's called The 5 Questions. And he says these are 5 questions that every business person needs to ask of themselves every year. With the first question being, what's your mission? Like, what's your fundamental purpose? And he says it's got to fit on a t-shirt. It's got to be short enough to fit in a t-shirt. Then he goes through the other question: who's your customer? What's your customer value? What are results? And what's the plan? You know, he lays it out really simply. But I'm a great believer in simplicity. Now, purpose has these fundamental positive attributes: live longer, high levels of motivation, retention, better performance, high levels of high levels of performance. So why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it? And I found that simple way to find and define your purpose is just use the code method. I like to say my code method is open source code. Anyone can use it. It's free. You can share it with anyone you want. It just takes up 15 minutes of time, 12 lines, every line beginning with I will, and then stand up and read it out loud and proud. I do this with the biggest companies in the world. I do it with rehab clinics. I do it in prisons. I do it with schools. A couple of weeks' time, I fly out to do a lecture and workshop at Kellogg Business School at Northwestern. I mean, I deal with the coolest companies, the coolest universities, because I think today, after what we've been through with COVID, people need something simple that can really help them find their purpose, find their power, and find their path.
Thank you, Shaun. And I'm familiar a little bit with your code, not very familiar, but and I'm studying it, and it's so simple. It's like it's unbelievably simple. So tell our audience here. Let's drill into it. What is the code all about, and why, and just how it works?
Well, Tony, you mentioned how simple it is, and it is so simple that it's childlike. And it's childlike because originally it was developed to inspire children. What happened was there's a famous surfing break called Rincon here in Santa Barbara near where I live, and it was faced with an environmental challenge. It was like effluent was flowing out from the river into the water and making surfers sick. And a friend of mine said, Shaun, I want you to help me solve this problem. He said, it's a big problem. It's a $30 million problem. He said, but I want you to help me, and I'm going to give you $100 budget to help solve the problem. And I said, like, what the hell can I do for $100? He said, well, I'm bringing a group of children down to the beach, and I'm bringing the media, and I'm bringing the water board and the government officials and the state officials. And I want you to inspire these kids. And perhaps if you inspire the kids, the media will get inspired too. And all these different people and government boards will get inspired too, and ultimately we can solve the problem. But inspire the kids. So I thought, like, what can I do for $100 and like 100 kids, $1 a kid? So I went home that night and I wrote 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. I wrote down the fundamental lessons that surfing had taught me about life. I wrote my code, just stream of consciousness, with the very first line being, I will never turn my back on the ocean, and then I will always paddle back out. I will realize that there will always be another wave. I will know that that all surfers are joined by one ocean. It was just really simple words, but powerful and deep. You know, it was the fundamental lesson surfing had taught me about life. Not how to be the best surfer in the world or how to win the most contests or ride the biggest waves, but about character, about ethos, character, and telos, purpose. So I made them up onto a little plastic card, printed 100 of them, cost me $100, and gave them out to the kids. And it turned into a groundswell. And ultimately, the environmental problem was solved, but the cards just took on a life of their own. And people asked us for the cards. And then we started putting the cards into the pockets of the shirts and the board shorts that my wife and I were making. We had our brand Solitude by then, and we were making lots of clothes. So lots of these cards were getting distributed out into the world. And then people would find the cards and they'd phone me up and say, hey, Shaun, why don't you come and talk at our leadership group? And I go, okay, well, talking's not really my thing, but yeah, you've got the code, and I think it's going to be interesting. And we'd like you to open our event. There's going to be 2,000 people, and you're going to be the first speaker. And then we're going to have Malcolm Gladwell's going to be the second person. And then we're going to have Richard Branson the third. So suddenly I'm speaking with these very, very famous people. And, Branson's talking about his amazing entrepreneurial success, and Malcolm Gladwell's talking about his books. And I'm talking about the code. I'm talking about character, and I'm talking about purpose in simple, simple words, using simple, simple metaphors. And it seemed to resonate with people, and it led to my first book called Surface Code. And then it led to another book called The Code, The Power of I Will. After I lost my son, I wrote a book as a way to empower positive choices amongst young people. And then it led me to doing these workshops now and keynotes for some of the world's largest corporations, speaking to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people and getting people to write their code, 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. So it's simple because it started with children. And I believe that as we go through life, sometimes that naivete and that creativity and that innocence and that openness sometimes gets crushed by the realities of being in the trenches, involved in hand-to-hand combat, because sometimes that's what it feels like being an entrepreneur. And sometimes you lose that dreamy, visionary aspect of your life. And this is such a simple way to bring it back. And when you do this process, you can see I'm very passionate about it because I've seen the impact, Tony. And when I do it with a team and everyone stands up and reads their code, there is such pride and there's such power and there's such deep emotional engagement. And in this country today, we are faced with such division. You have Republicans on one side of the valley, you have Democrats on the other side of the valley, and you have a black space in between. And I like to think that this code is a bridge, because when people read their codes to one another, they read words of purity, of passion, of purpose and power, and they reveal their true values. And whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat, the values, the fundamental values, are way closer than we think they are. And when a person stands up, like when I spoke in a prison, and these inmates stood up after I spoke, and one at a time, they read their codes. And there's spontaneous applause after each reading. And it came to the biggest, strongest prisoner. He's a very, very big bloke. And he's reading his lines, and he comes to a line, I will forgive myself. And he starts crying. And I'm looking, going like, what are the other prisoners going to do now? They all rush up to him, they all hug him, and they all start crying too. There was such connectivity and such catharsis and such understanding. It was wonderful to see. So I like to think that the code, it's not just a vehicle to find a purpose, but it's a vehicle to emotionally engage with others and to unite people, even though they might have different political persuasions. It's a way that we can bring people together.
That's very strong. Shaun, let's go over some of these 12, let's call them affirmations, the code. Let's go over them and how the entrepreneurs in our audience, how they can actually use them to grow and be more successful in their business.
Well, everyone's code is different, Tony. So the way it works is generally I will firstly I'll give a perspective of my life. It's been lived with passion and purpose. I'll tell 3 or 4 stories. I'll tell a story about commitment, a story about connectivity, a story about innovation, and a story about resilience and perseverance. And then everyone will write their code. 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. It's 15 minutes. That's all it takes. Just take a sheet of paper and you write it. So it's a wonderful thing to do with your family or team at work. And then after that, everyone stands up and they read their code. So they're reading out not who they were, but who they will be. You're reading out.
Shaun, let me understand this. These are 12 points, starting with I will or I will always. and we write 12 of them. And is this something that we repeat every day and
No,
just say it out loud or what?
you just write it once. You
Okay.
write the code once and you share it. I wrote my code 20 years ago, and I don't look at my code every day, but I carry it around with me in my wallet. And when I need it, it's there. If things are going sideways and I look at my words, I go, I'll never fight a riptide. I'll always paddle back out. My words give me great power. I've found that the words of others inspire us, certainly. Winston Churchill, JFK, Barack Obama, Martin Luther King. I mean, there's many great leaders whose words inspire us. So the words of others inspire us, certainly, but our words transform us. Our words, our own words, are words of transformation, especially in the context of the code, because the code is about the future. The code's not about yesterday. The code's not about today. The code is about the future. The code is about creating a different path, committing to something new, committing to a change. I did this. I did this conference in leadership at a really wonderful group a couple of weeks ago. It was called the Modern Elder Academy. It started by a guy called Chip Conklin, who was one of the brains trust at Airbnb, and one of the women spoke afterwards, and she made a statement. One of her codes was, and this is a great one for couples, I thought, because my wife and I, we've been married 35, 36 years. We know a little bit about being in a relationship from a long-term basis. She said, "I will apologize quickly." So these words of others certainly inspire us, and I thought, wow, that's such a gem. I will apologize quickly. Just like that prisoner stood up and said, I will forgive myself. And the very first line of code I ever got back, Tony, the very first time I did the exercise, it was probably 6 years ago. No, maybe longer, maybe about 14 years ago, was from a young girl. The very first line of code I got back, I will be myself, from a 13-year-old. And for all of us that are parents out there, entrepreneurs that have parents, I mean, those are incredibly powerful words, because we know the choices that our children are faced with every day, that we know the negative influences we're faced with. And for this young girl to say, I will be myself, it was words of absolute power.
Shaun, why are there only 12?
Now that's a good one, Teddy. I don't know that. It just came out. It just came out at 12. Perhaps in the back of my mind, I had been thinking about the 12 steps from Alcoholics Anonymous, perhaps. I mean, that has been the single most powerful and effective behavior change method in the history of the world, the 12 steps, and it's helped millions of people find a positive path through life. So maybe that was in the back of my mind. I don't know, but it just came out at 12. It was like 15 minutes. It came out at 12, and I thought, wow, 12 is a pretty good number, symmetrical, and seemed to have a lot of power, and that's why it came out at 12.
12 works. And so I'm thinking with this, and again, I mentioned this here and there, we're entrepreneurs, we're business people in this audience. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got these codes, I'm going to write them down, I've got them. Okay, now a big challenge comes in my business, a big challenge. Does that code play a part in this, or do I redo the code if something else goes wrong and I come up with something else? I'm just trying to get the application and how and if it can help navigate us through, a big challenge or issue in our life.
I wrote mine 20 years ago, and the future's unwritten. No one knows what the future holds for us. But all I know is that my words apply for me to whatever the future might hold. And when my wife and I lost our beautiful son in 2006, and surfing really helped me get back on the path to healing again. And my words, I will always paddle back out. Um, Very important to me. And then these other words that I wrote, I will pass on my stoke to a non-surfer. So stoke is this feeling of exuberance and exhilaration that surfers get, but this process of helping others, of inspiring others, for me was a wonderful path to help me through my grief. So I didn't know that my words would help me in the future. And I think for any entrepreneur, they write their code, keep your code, post it up on your computer, put it in your wallet. You can actually go to my website and you can write your code. Your words will be there for you when you need them. You write your code will be there for you when you need it. Guaranteed. It's been there for me. It's been there for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I get wonderful letters from people about how the code has helped them immeasurably in their life. I lost 50 pounds as a result of writing my code. The code helped me get out of the mud. The code is my North Star. The code helped me improve my relationship with my 8-year-old son. There's many, 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 many positive attributes to creating this 15-minute moment of introspection, imagination, commitment, and action.
I really like it, Shaun. It's like the 12 most powerful affirmations that you can imagine that will just see you throughout life, throughout success, throughout relationships, throughout everything. And maybe I need a little bit more than 15 minutes to write it down. Maybe not. But once they're done, I can totally see how they're set for life because they're creating your future. They're a building block. So I really like that. I really like that. And I want to thank you so much for joining us and going over this. Once again, we spoke about finding your purpose and actually also uh, finding your finding or putting in place your code for life. Some people may ask, what's the code for? I'm thinking it's our code for life. It's what's going to see us through. And do I have that right? Is that kind of why you call it the code? It's like you write it once and it just keeps you going.
Yeah, I think the code is, in some ways, it's a reflection of a positive mindset. It's a reflection of your fundamental purpose in life. I've read millions of lines of code, and the fundamental purpose of life can be described by 2 lines of code. I will be better. We want to be better. We have this genetic compulsion to be better today than we were yesterday, tomorrow than we were today. And we have this compulsion to help others be better. So there's 2 sides to our fundamental purpose. We want to be better and we want to help others be better. And the code is just a simple way to commit to a life of purpose. I'll have faith. I will pray. I will live a life of moral integrity. Once you write it down, and once you've made those promises to yourself, you've committed to them. And if you verbalize it in a group, you have that accountability and you have increased motivation to actualize those values and those commitments. I like to think the code is poetry of the soul. The code is your passion and the code is your purpose.
I love it. Once again, we spoke about finding your purpose with Shaun Thompson, and you can find him at ShaunThompson.com. Shaun, thank you much. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I can't wait. I'm already writing it, so I'm like, I can't wait. I want to write my code. And I just want to thank you for sharing. It's very inspirational.
Tony, thanks for having me on and thanks for the wonderful work you do to inspire people and to inspire entrepreneurs. I mean, 65% of the American economy is generated by entrepreneurs, people like us. So you're certainly helping a terrific sector of the economy. So thank you. Thanks for the inspiration.
My pleasure. I'm happy to help as I can. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me while I featured an elite entrepreneur who took his vision to reality. We spoke about finding your purpose with Shaun Thompson. We talked about the code and our purpose, like why do we need to find our purpose? How do we find our purpose? How does the code fit in? What is the code? What's the code for the next wave? And another way to look at it is these are 12 affirmation commitments, and they set us up for life. Once you write them down, which Shaun says takes about 15 minutes, that it just sets up your life and it kind of navigates you through. I can't wait to write mine. And I ask you, check it out, write out your code, tell us how it goes. And please share this with a few friends. You're going to help them too. They need to know this about how to write their code. All right. Thank you. Use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks. And remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds, and join me on the next episode of The Tony DUrso Show.